about the future doesn't mean that you don't get to choose freely. It just means that we become aware of what you freely choose.
No, but what you're doing as a remote viewer is going in and seeing what was chosen before I've chosen. And so my question is, am I really freely choosing anything at that point? I mean, I think I am. But if it's already happened and the remote viewer is queuing into a future that hasn't happened yet, but from the remote viewing standpoint, it's happened, my question to you existentially is, then do we really have free will? And my sense is yes and no.
That's the right answer.
Okay.
You have a little free will, but much less than you think you have.
Exactly. Okay, that's what I thought.
Basically, I'm a determinist. That is, I think that things that occur indeed have causes. If I pick up this tumbler, the tumbler rises because I picked it up. It didn't magically levitate off the table. I think that to the extent that you're in touch with your psychic abilities, you can gain some free will. In general, the most common psychic phenomena that people experience in their lives are precognitive dreams, where you have a dream in the evening of something that you're going to experience the following day. And you can learn to recognize those experiences as being unusually clear or bizarre or not part of your ordinary repertoire. So you can wake up and say, gee, I had this very clear dream of driving down the freeway and the steering wheel actually came right off in my hand and I crashed the car in a ball of flame. And I don't want to have that experience. So you can then take your car into the garage and have them check the wheels and check the steering wheel, and they might notice that the steering wheel is okay, but one of your wheels had lost all of its nuts, and that wheel would soon come loose. So you don't have to die in a ball of flame. The garage can fix that, but there was some non-actualized future. The psychic can see into the future what might have happened, but you can use your psychic abilities or your awareness of precognition not to have the terrible experience.
That's fantastic. Now, I saw in one of your interviews when you did talk about precognitive dreams, correct me if I'm wrong, by writing your dreams down, it helps to increase your precognitive dream ability. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. Writing, it's well known among dream researchers, and Jung talks about that in his wonderful book, Dreams, Memories, and Reflections, that when he became interested in dreams, he found that if he had a dream notebook next to his bed, and as soon as he awakened, he would write down the dream he had. And you want to do that before you get up to go to the bathroom or wash your face, because moving your big muscles erases the dream from your memory, unfortunately. So if you want to remember your dreams and record them, you should do it immediately upon awakening and just write that down in a notebook. And then you'll develop a collection of dreams, and you can learn which dreams are precognitive and which are the ordinary day's residue of anxiety and wish fulfillment, so forth.
You also assert that there's a way to distinguish the two. That's
right. Your anxiety dreams or dreams from the previous day's residue or wish fulfillment dreams are just as I've said. So if I have an exam coming up and I have a dream about failing for the exam and I hadn't studied for it, we would not consider that precognitive. It's just what you'd expect. But if I have a dream about a hippopotamus walking down my neighborhood street in Palo Alto, and that's never happened, I've never seen a hippopotamus in California, and it was really a realistic dream, I wrote that down, I would assume that either I'm going to see that in the movies or see it on television or animals going to break loose from the zoo, that if I have a sort of out-of-context, preternaturally clear, a hyper-clear dream, then I assume that that's stimulated by something I'm going to see at a later time, rather than things I'm anxious about or the previous day's residue. If I went to a waterfall yesterday and then dream about a waterfall tonight, I wouldn't consider that precognitive, obviously.
Right.
The biggest source of my precognitive dreams are the front page of the New York Times, which I see upon awakening. The first thing I do in the morning when I get up is grab a cup of coffee and sit down in front of my computer, and my homepage is the New York Times. So the first thing I see is whatever picture is on the front page of the New York Times, and I frequently have a awakening dream related to what that picture is.
Is that because you want to know? Have you programmed yourself to want to see that?
No, it's just the first interesting thing that appears in my awareness in the morning.
Okay.
Another source of precognitive dreams for me are things that I see in the movies. If I'm going to a movie the next evening, I will occasionally have dreams stimulated by funny things that happen in the movie. And I've gotten pretty good at recognizing that, so I can tell my wife that I saw this strange thing, and I bet that's going to be in the movie. The day I was going to see the brand new Woody Allen film, Midnight in Paris, I woke up and I was seeing a picture of a man in a bright green shirt. And that just made no sense to me. There's no reason that I would have such a dream. I'm not worried about that. I haven't seen it. So I mentioned that to my wife. And in fact, in the opening credits, there's a painter who you see filling the screen in a bright green shirt. It was exactly what I had described. So you can learn when something crazy or unbidden comes into your awareness that's probably from what's going to happen the next day.
You had written on page 136 in Do You See What I See that the airplanes on 9/11 were unusually empty, actually all 4 planes. Now, that's a very sensitive observation to put into a book. Could you share about that?
On September 10th, the day before 9/11, I flew to Italy. I had a peace conference scheduled to attend on 9/11, which I attended in Assisi, Italy. So on 9/11, I was at a courtyard by the Church of St. Francis, standing in a big circle, probably not singing Kumbaya because we're in Italy, but somebody was wishing for world peace. And then a messenger came running into our circle and said that this calamity had happened in New York. And I couldn't get any information because CNN is in Italian. So it was very hard to understand what was going on. So the next day, I got the International Herald Tribune, and that had a long article, of course, and that sort of listed in distress how many people had been killed on each of these big transcontinental airplanes. This was 9/11. I was just 3 years away from being intensely involved in airplane safety. So I had a dozen years at Lockheed, intimately concerned with how many people are on these airplanes. And I could see in a glance that all 4 of these planes were less than half full. What we call a load factor. What percentage of the people, the load factor for the 4 airplanes together was under 40%, which is shocking. Because if you think about an airplane these days, they're jammed to pieces, especially the morning flight of a transcontinental plane is normally filled. I knew that experiments had been done, like data had been collected on this subject 30 years before pertaining to train crashes on the east coast of the U.S., where people stay off railroad trains that are going to crash in the future. And here it was obvious from this write-up, which has been big literature on this in Google if you're interested. It's not controversial. It's evident that these planes were anomalously empty on the day that they all crashed.
Why do you think they were empty?
Well, the apparency, the phenomenological answer to your question is lots of people woke up that morning and decided not to fly. So I have to decide that there's a backwards ripple in time where people were psychically aware, intuitively aware that something bad was going to happen on that day and chose to fly some other day.
So it's like a phenomenon where people do get that information.
I mean, for example, I was in the air the previous day. I was early for my conference. If I had not flown out on the 10th, I wouldn't have been able to teach in Italy because the planes were grounded for the next week. So I was rewarded for being my usual obsessive self to make sure I was there a couple of days early for a workshop. So it's obvious that hundreds of people decided not to fly that day.
With all of the remote viewing experience and psychic experience,